Imagine holding in your hand a coin that is not only a piece of silver, but also a piece of American history, a coin that represents a nation's resilience after the Second World War, a coin that captures the face of one of the most influential leaders of the United States, and a coin that collectors today treasure for its rarity and value. The 1948 half-dollar coin is not just money, it is a story frozen in metal, a story that begins in the aftermath of the Great Depression and the global conflict that followed, a story that ties together politics, economics, artistry, and legacy. When we look at the 1948 half-dollar, we are looking at the very first year of the Franklin half-dollar series, a design that ran from 1948 until 1963 and marked a departure from traditional coinage designs. The coin was introduced to honor Benjamin Franklin, one of the most brilliant founding fathers, a man whose inventions, writings, and statesmanship had left an enduring mark on the nation, and in 1948 his image was struck on a half-dollar coin for the first time, replacing the walking Liberty half-dollar, which itself was one of the most beloved designs in American numismatics. The decision to honor Franklin on the half-dollar was not random. It came from Mint director Nellie Taylor Ross, who admired Franklin deeply and wanted to see his legacy represented in circulating coinage. Franklin was known for his role in drafting the Declaration of Independence, his diplomacy in France during the American Revolution, his experiments with electricity, and his famous sayings in Poor Richard's Almanac. By placing Franklin on the coin, the United States Mint was paying tribute to his vision of liberty, innovation, and civic responsibility. The reverse of the coin carried the Liberty Bell, a symbol of American independence, but it also had a small eagle to satisfy a legal requirement that all half-dollars must bear an eagle. This combination of the Liberty Bell and eagle made the coin unique both artistically and historically. The year 1948 marked the first mintage of this design, and as such it became a landmark year in United States coinage history. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 3 million of these coins, while the Denver Mint struck fewer, giving collectors today two different mint marks to seek out for their collections. The striking of these coins was done in 90% silver, which means each coin contained real intrinsic value beyond its face value. And in the late 1940s, silver coins were still a part of everyday commerce, being exchanged in shops, banks, and daily trade. As we move deeper into the history of this coin, we can see how it reflects not only the art of coin design, but also the economic realities of the time. America in 1948 was shifting into a new era. The war had ended just a few years earlier, soldiers had returned home, industries were booming, and the nation was entering a period of prosperity. Yet there was also the beginning of the Cold War and uncertainty on the global stage. This coin circulated during a time when Americans were buying homes, starting families, and building what we now call the modern American dream. The half-dollar itself was a significant denomination, often used in banks and larger transactions, and it was a coin that symbolized substance and value. Numismatists today study the details of the 1948 half-dollar closely. The Portrait of Franklin by John R. Sinek, the chief engraver of the United States Mint, carried his initials juniors at the base of the bust. Interestingly, Sinek had already designed Franklin's portrait for a medal years earlier, and that design was adapted for the coin. Some at the time even mistook the initials juniors for a hidden tribute to Joseph Stalin, which caused controversy in the early years of the coin's release. But the truth was far less dramatic and simply connected to the engraver's name. The coin's reverse, with the Liberty Bell, contained every line and crack carefully engraved, and collectors today often examine how well those details were struck when evaluating condition and grade. Higher grade examples with sharp strikes are worth much more than worn circulated pieces. Because this was the first year of issue, the 1948 half-dollar has always had collector appeal, and as silver coinage was later removed from circulation after 1964, these earlier issues became even more treasured. Today, collectors look for both Philadelphia and Denver Mint examples and examine details such as luster, toning, strike sharpness, and any possible minting errors. Over the decades, the Franklin half-dollar series has become one of the most studied and beloved coin series in American numismatics. The 1948 coin represents the beginning of that journey. is not just a coin, it is a gateway into a world of collecting history and heritage, and it continues to inspire collectors both young and old. The 1948 half dollar is more than just silver. It is a monument in miniature to Benjamin Franklin and to the America of the late 1940s. It tells us about who we were as a nation, where we were headed, and what values we chose to honor every time it changed hands in shops, banks, and households. This coin spoke of independence, innovation, and the lasting memory of a founding father, and as we trace its history, we uncover layer after layer of meaning, from its design origins to its place in post-war America, from the artistry of Sinnock to the controversies of the initials, from the symbolism of the Liberty Bell to the economic role of silver coins in daily life. This is a story rich enough to fill hours of study and appreciation, and that is why the 1948 half dollar continues to shine in the world of coins, a small piece of silver with a giant story to tell. Imagine finding in your pocket a coin that is more than just 50 cents, a coin that carries the face of one of the most brilliant minds in American history, a coin that represents the very first chapter of a legendary coin series, and a coin that still echoes the spirit of freedom, innovation, and resilience of the United States. This is the 1948 half dollar, the first ever Franklin half dollar, and it is no ordinary piece of silver. It is a story carved in metal, a story that begins with the vision of a mint director who admired Benjamin Franklin so deeply that she wanted his legacy struck into the hands of millions of Americans. It is a story of artistry, from the hands of chief engraver John R. Sinnock, whose design would both inspire admiration and spark controversy when his initials were mistaken for a hidden tribute to a foreign leader. It is a story of the Liberty Bell placed boldly on the reverse, a national symbol of independence, but forced to share space with an eagle because of old laws that demanded its presence. It is a story of an America in 1948, rebuilding from war, stepping into prosperity, and yet entering a Cold War where every symbol of freedom mattered. This coin touched hands in shops and banks. It lived in pockets and purses. It was exchanged in a time when silver still gave weight and value to money, and today it stands as the beginning of a beloved coin series that would last until 1963, when it gave way to another icon, the Kennedy half dollar. The 1948 half dollar is the key that unlocks the door to post-war America, to numismatic artistry, to national pride, and to the enduring memory of Benjamin Franklin. And when you dive into its history, you will not only uncover the origins of its design, the drama of its controversy, and the beauty of its craftsmanship, but you will also hold a mirror to the America of the late 1940s, an America proud, resilient, and forward-looking. This coin is not just a piece of silver, it is a piece of the American story. Imagine holding in your hand a piece of metal that weighs only a few grams, yet carries within it the story of America in the early 1970s, a time of social change, political upheaval, and economic uncertainty. The 1971 half dollar coin is not just a piece of currency, it is a window into the past, a physical object that reflects the decisions of the United States Mint, the legacy of President Dwight D. Eisenhower, the transition away from silver coinage, and the ongoing evolution of American money. This coin, which at first glance seems ordinary, actually marks the beginning of an important chapter in US coin history, because 1971 was the very first year the United States stopped minting circulating half dollars in silver and instead moved fully into a copper nickel-clad composition. That choice did not happen in isolation. It was the result of decades of debates within Congress, rising silver prices, and a changing economy that forced America to rethink what its coins should be made of. If we go back to the 1960s, we find that the Kennedy half dollar, first introduced in 1964, had been minted with 90% silver and 10% copper. That design was created almost overnight following the tragic assassination of President John F. Kennedy, as a way to honor his memory, and the American public embraced the coin with overwhelming passion. Millions of Americans hoarded the coin as keepsakes, and very few made it into circulation, but the rising price of silver soon made it impractical for the government to continue issuing these coins for everyday use. So in 1965, the mint reduced the silver content to 40%, and by 1971, the final shift occurred with the introduction of a half-dollar that was no longer silver. All this transition was monumental because it signaled the end of an era for collectors and the beginning of a new one for everyday coinage. The 1971 half-dollar became a dividing line between silver-era coins and modern-clad coinage. When we examine the coin itself, we find that it continues the Kennedy design with the left-facing portrait of the president on the obverse designed by Gilroy Roberts, and the presidential seal with the heraldic eagle on the reverse designed by Frank Gasparo. The design itself had already become iconic, representing both the memory of Kennedy and the prestige of the American presidency, but by 1971, this coin was no longer a symbol of wealth, it was a symbol of change. What makes the 1971 half-dollar fascinating for collectors is not only its place in history, but also the details of how it was struck and distributed. The mint facilities at Philadelphia and Denver struck circulation coins, while the San Francisco Mint produced proof coins for collectors. The Philadelphia coins carried no mint mark, the Denver coins bore the D mint mark, and the San Francisco proof coins carried the S mint mark. But here is where things get even more intriguing, because within the 1971 production run certain varieties and errors were created that today make these coins far more valuable than their face value. Some of the most famous include the 1971 D half-dollar struck on a silver planchet, a mistake that happened when leftover silver blanks from the earlier years were accidentally fed into the presses. These error coins are extremely rare and can fetch thousands of dollars at auction. Other errors include double dies, off-center strikes, and weakly struck designs, which add to the appeal for collectors and investors. Each of these rare varieties tells us something about the production challenges and the transition period at the mint during this time. And beyond the minting details, the coin also reflects the wider context of America in 1971. This was the year when the US was deeply involved in the Vietnam War, when President Nixon had announced the closing of the gold window, effectively ending the Bretton Woods system, and when inflation pressures were beginning to shape American life. The half-dollar in 1971 circulated far less than other denominations because the public had developed a habit of not using half-dollars in everyday commerce. This created a paradox. The mint continued producing millions of half-dollars, but banks and businesses reported low demand, leading to stockpiles in vaults. This circulation pattern has persisted to this day, making the half-dollar one of the least used denominations in modern America, yet it remains one of the most recognized coins in the world for collectors. When you hold a 1971 half-dollar, you are not just holding a piece of clad metal. You are holding the story of the United States shifting away from silver coinage, a government responding to economic pressures, a nation remembering a fallen president, and a mint adapting to new realities. This coin is a crossroads of history, and it is filled with secrets that make it far more than just 50 cents in value. In the course of this video, we will explore the detailed history of why the coin was created, how it was designed, what varieties and errors exist, how collectors value it today, and how this single piece of metal connects to the broader economic and political story of America in the 1970s. The 1971 half-dollar is a coin that at first looks common, but by the end of our journey, you will see it is anything but common. By the time we arrive in 1971, the Kennedy half-dollar had already gone through several transitions. The first year, 1964, was struck in 90% silver. Then from 1965 through 1970, the coins were reduced to 40% silver, a compromise between public expectation and economic necessity. But the rising global price of silver made even this compromise unsustainable. By 1971, silver had become too valuable for circulating coinage, and so the government officially ended the use of silver in the half-dollar for everyday issues, replacing it with the copper-nickel-clad composition, the same basic structure that had already been adopted for quarters and dimes, a copper core sandwiched between outer layers of nickel, giving the coin a silvery appearance without any intrinsic precious metal value. Decision was not without controversy. Many Americans felt that coins without silver were somehow cheap or less real, but from the perspective of the mint and the treasury, this was the only viable option to keep coins in circulation at their intended face value. So the 1971 half-dollar emerged as the first fully clad Kennedy half-dollar, a turning point in us Coinagawan. We look at the details of this coin. The Philadelphia Mint produced more than 155 million pieces, while the Denver Mint struck over 300 million, making it one of the highest mintage years in the series, and the San Francisco Mint focused on proof coinage for collectors struck in deep cameo brilliance. The sheer volume of coins produced means that the 1971 half-dollar in its normal circulation form is very common, yet the story becomes interesting when we uncover the rare exceptions and the striking errors that escaped quality control during this massive transition period. One of the most famous and desirable rarities is the 1971 D half-dollar struck on a 40% silver planchet. These rare errors occurred because leftover silver blanks from May 1970 have accidentally been fed into presses intended for the new clad coins. Only a handful of these silver planchet strikes have been authenticated, and when they appear at auction, they can sell for thousands of dollars. Other dramatic varieties include double die obverse coins, where the lettering or portrait shows noticeable doubling, creating a unique collectible item. Off-center strikes, broad strikes, and even coins struck on wrong planchets intended for other denominations. All of these errors are eagerly hunted by collectors because they connect to the uncertainty of that year, the literal mistakes made during a time of change. The story of the 1974 half-dollar is far more than just the tale of a piece of metal struck by the United States Mint. It is a chapter in American history that reflects politics, art, public memory, and the transformation of coinage in the 20th century. To understand the 1974 half-dollar, we must first go back to the origins of the Kennedy half-dollar itself, because this coin was not simply a matter of monetary design, but rather a national symbol born out of tragedy. When President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in November of 1963, the nation was plunged into mourning, and within weeks, the United States Mint received pressure from Congress and the American public to honor Kennedy on a circulating coin. The decision was made to place his image on the half-dollar, replacing the Franklin design that had only been in use since 1948. And in 1964, the first Kennedy half-dollar was struck in 90% silver and released to the public, where it was instantly hoarded as both a keepsake and a memorial to the fallen president. By the time 1974 arrived, the Kennedy half-dollar had already been through a transformation in composition because silver was rapidly being removed from circulating coinage. The Coinage Act of 1965 had reduced the silver content of the half-dollar to 40%, and then in 1971, the Mint abandoned silver entirely for general circulation, striking the Kennedy half-dollar in a copper-nickel-clad composition similar to the quarter and dime. So the 1974 half-dollar became part of this new era, where the coin was no longer a silver piece, but rather a circulating clad coin that reflected inflation, rising costs of metal, and the modernization of American coinage. Design of the 1974 half-dollar still carried the same bold portrait of John F. Kennedy, created by Gilroy Roberts, the chief engraver of the United States Mint. His profile faces left with sharp features that gave the coin an enduring sense of authority and memorial dignity. The reverse was designed by Frank Gasparo, featuring the presidential coat of arms with the heraldic eagle clutching arrows and an olive branch surrounded by a ring of 50 stars, symbolizing the unity of the nation. By 1974, this design had become iconic and familiar to millions of Americans, but it was still relatively new in the history of US coinage, only a decade old, yet firmly tied to the memory of Kennedy and the turbulent 1960s. The year 1974 itself was a dramatic year in American history, with the Watergate scandal unfolding and eventually forcing the resignation of President Richard Nixon. Coins minted during this time carry the silent backdrop of a country facing political division, economic challenges, and a loss of trust in leadership. Yet the Kennedy half-dollar served as a reminder of a different president, one remembered more favorably and connected to a hopeful vision of the future. The 1974 half-dollar was struck at three minting facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia coins carry no mint mark. The Denver coins bear the familiar D mark, and the San Francisco mint produced both regular proofs and special collector strikes with the S mint mark. The mintage was very large, with tens of millions struck at both Philadelphia and Denver, and millions of proof issues from San Francisco. Yet despite these high mintages, the coin was rarely seen in daily use, because by the mid-1970s, the half-dollar had already begun its slow disappearance from circulation. Vending machines, cash registers, and banks did not favor the size of the half-dollar, and the public simply did not use it regularly. Most of the coins went into storage or into collections, and even today original rolls of 1974 half-dollars can be found largely untouched. But what makes the 1974 half-dollar fascinating for collectors is not just its widespread mintage, but the presence of notable varieties and errors among them. The most famous is the 1974 D double die obverse, where the lettering on the obverse, particularly in the word trust in the motto "In God We Trust," shows strong doubling. This variety has captured the attention of collectors because while it is not as dramatic as the famous 1955 double die cent, it is still a major double die of the modern era and can command significant premiums depending on condition. Examples in high mint state or proof-like grades are especially desirable and can turn a common coin worth 50 cents into a numismatic treasure worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Another important aspect of the 1974 series is its role in proof coinage, as the San Francisco Mint continued to perfect its techniques for mirror-like fields and frosted devices. Collectors could obtain high-quality proof coins directly from the mint packaged in official government sets. These proofs serve as time capsules of the mint's capabilities during the mid-1970s, and their preservation in pristine condition makes them popular among serious numismatists. Historical context of the 1974 half-dollar also extends into broader monetary policy in the United States, because by this time Americans were adjusting to a currency system no longer backed by precious metals. President Nixon had taken the US off the gold standard completely in 1971, and the removal of silver from circulating coinage was part of this larger break with metal-backed money. The 1974 half-dollar therefore represents both the memory of Kennedy and the practical reality of a modern fiat currency system. It is both symbol and tool, both commemoration and commerce, though commerce was less frequent because of the coin's declining usage in daily transaction. Scholars today study the 1974 half-dollar not just for its varieties, but also for grading conditions, mint state preservation, and strike quality. The clad composition was prone to contact marks and bag marks, making high-grade examples, especially in Ms. 66 or Ms. 67, difficult to obtain from original rolls. Grading services like PCGs and NGC have recorded relatively few in the highest grades, which means that registry collectors who build sets of Kennedy halves often pursue these top-end 1974 issues aggressively. This pursuit drives prices higher for the finest examples, even though the majority of coins remain common in lower circulated grades. When we step back and view the 1974 half-dollar within the entire timeline of American coinage, it occupies a unique position. It is neither as historically monumental as the first 1964 silver issue, nor as dramatically experimental as the bicentennial design of 1976, but it is firmly rooted in the heart of the 1970s, a coin struck during an era of political upheaval, economic transition, and cultural change. It carries the face of a president who symbolized youth, vigor, and optimism. Yet it circulated during a decade that saw disillusionment, stagflation, and scandal, making the coin both a reminder of lost promise, and a participant in a new uncertain age ethos. When you hold a 1974 half-dollar, you are not just holding a piece of copper and nickel, you are holding a link to a president's memory, to a time when the mint was adjusting to new economic realities, to a nation wrestling with trust in leadership, and to the enduring American habit of turning tragedy into tribute through coinage. The 1974 half-dollar may not be rare in sheer numbers, but it is rare in meaning because it speaks to a transitional decade in the United States and to the continuing legacy of Kennedy's image on American money. In the mid-1970s, America stood at a turning point in its history, and this turning point was not only felt in politics, culture, and society, but also etched forever into the very coins that passed through the hands of millions of Americans. And among these coins, the 1976 half-dollar, known as the bicentennial Kennedy half-dollar, holds a place unlike any other, because the single piece of metal captures the celebration of 200 years of American independence, the memory of a fallen president, and the story of a nation that was both looking back at its birth and forward to its future. To understand the power of this coin, we must travel back to 1963, when the assassination of President John F. Kennedy shocked the world. Within months, his portrait replaced Benjamin Franklin on the half-dollar, symbolizing both national mourning and collective memory. But fast forward to the early 1970s, when the United States was preparing to mark the bicentennial of the Declaration of Independence, the Treasury and Congress knew that something special had to be done with American coinage, so the mint prepared a commemorative redesign for the quarter, the half-dollar, and the Eisenhower dollar coins, and in doing so they created some of the most recognized coins in modern US history. The 1976 Kennedy half-dollar became a centerpiece of the celebration, bearing a reverse design unlike any other ever struck before. The reverse, designed by Seth G. Huntington, depicted Independence Hall in Philadelphia, the birthplace of American liberty. It was a design meant to capture the very heart of the bicentennial, the place where the Founding Fathers had declared freedom 2 centuries earlier, and on the obverse the familiar and iconic bust of John F. Kennedy by Gilroy Roberts remained a constant, reminding the nation of leadership, sacrifice, and enduring vision. The combination of Kennedy's image on the front and Independence Hall on the back created a coin that bridged 2 defining moments: the Revolution of 1776 and the tragedy of 1963. The coin was issued with the dual date 1776 to 1976 instead of the usual single date, and this immediately made it stand out for collectors and everyday Americans alike. It symbolized the sweep of history, 200 years of struggle, triumph, innovation, and resilience, and unlike many commemorative coins that were struck in small quantities, the bicentennial half-dollars were produced in the hundreds of millions by the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints, and struck in both circulation strike copper, nickel clad, and special collector issues in 40% silver, making them accessible every pocket, and yet also desirable for numismatists. When you hold a 1976 half-dollar, you are holding not only money, but also a monument to history, a coin that traveled in circulation through the hands of everyday citizens during the great celebrations of America's bicentennial. Fireworks, parades, and patriotic displays swept across every city and town, and the very coins used to buy food tickets and souvenirs bore this special design. But beyond its circulation use, the coin also reflects the fascinating economics of the mint and the collector market. In the 1970s, the US Mint had learned from the lessons of the 1960s, when silver was withdrawn from coinage and coin collecting boomed. So when the bicentennial approached, the mint prepared large quantities of special collector sets, proof and uncirculated issues to satisfy both patriotic Americans and numismatists. And today, these coins, whether found in circulated condition jingling in old drawers or in pristine condition sealed in government packaging, remain an enduring symbol of that era. But to appreciate the full history of the 1976 Kennedy half-dollar, we must go deeper into the design, the production, the cultural meaning, and the collector value. We must understand the symbolism of Independence Hall, why Huntington's design was chosen, and how it competed with other proposed sketches. We must examine the production process in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, the challenges of striking dual-dated coins, the use of special bicentennial dies, and the decision to mint both clad and silver issues. We must look at the distribution and marketing by the mint, how proof and mint sets were sold in massive numbers as keepsakes for the bicentennial celebration. We must also trace how the public reacted to the coin, how many Americans saved them as souvenirs rather than spending them, how dealers and collectors predicted future values, and how over time the market for bicentennial half dollars evolved, with some issues like the 40% silver proofs gaining stronger premiums while the clad versions remained common in circulation. And then there is the story of Kennedy's legacy itself, for this coin was more than a commemoration of the revolution, it was also a continuation of the memorial to America's 35th president, whose youthful energy and tragic death left an indelible mark on the nation. The bicentennial coinage thus became not only a patriotic tribute, but also a cultural artifact representing hope, loss, remembrance, and pride. And as we unfold this history, we must also analyze its place among other bicentennial coinage: the quarter with Jack L.R.'s colonial drummer, and the Eisenhower dollar with Dennis Williams' Liberty Bell and Moon design. Together they formed a triad of commemorative issues, each telling part of the bicentennial story. And yet, the half dollar perhaps carried the most layered symbolism, because it was already tied to Kennedy's image, and now tied to Independence Hall, giving it a dual weight of memory and meaning. Collectors today often overlook the significance of the 1976 half dollar because of its high mintage, but true students of numismatics understand that rarity is not the only measure of important significance. History, symbolism, and cultural resonance matter as much, and in those areas the bicentennial Kennedy half dollar remains unmatched. Over the course of this deep exploration, we will walk through the origins, the artistic competition, the symbolism of the designs, the role of the mint, the mintage figures, the varieties, including clad and silver, the proof sets, and the collector reception. We will examine how values have shifted over time, why certain issues carry premiums, and why this coin remains an essential part of any serious coin collection. By the end of this journey, you will see that the 1976 half dollar is not just a coin, but a time capsule, a patriotic emblem, and a memorial rolled into one small disc of metal. And that is why when we hold it, we are holding not just currency, but a piece of America's story, and to understand it fully is to understand the very soul of the bicentennial era. Imagine holding in your hand a piece of American history that reflects the politics, the culture, the artistry, and the economics of its time. The 1977 half dollar may look like an ordinary coin to many, but in truth, it is part of a long evolving story that began decades earlier with the birth of the Kennedy half dollar and stretches through the fabric of American life in the 20th century. To fully understand the 1977 half dollar, you must first look back to the moment that gave rise to the Kennedy half dollar itself. The tragic assassination of President John F. Kennedy in November 1963 shocked the world, and just weeks later a movement began to honor him with a coin. Congress swiftly authorized the design of a half dollar carrying his portrait, and in early 1964, the Kennedy half dollar was born. Struck in 90% silver, it instantly became a beloved tribute, collected, cherished, and hoarded by Americans everywhere, and its popularity was so immense that it practically vanished from circulation. People saw it as more than money, they saw it as a memorial, as a reminder of a young president taken too soon. As the years passed, the coin endured changes in metal composition due to rising silver prices. In 1965, the United States shifted from 90% silver to a reduced composition of 40% silver clad. And then by 1971, the Treasury removed silver entirely, introducing a copper-nickel clad half dollar similar in composition to the quarter and the dime. This is the background against which the 1977 half dollar was struck, and to appreciate its meaning, you must view it within the broader context of these changes. The year 1977 was a period of transformation in the United States. The nation was grappling with the aftermath of the Vietnam War, the cultural shifts of the 70s, the economic turbulence of inflation and unemployment, and a desire for renewal under the presidency of Jimmy Carter. While these events shaped the country, the mint continued producing coins for commerce, and among them the Kennedy half-dollar remained a fixture, though its role in everyday circulation was diminishing. By this time, fewer Americans used half-dollars in daily transactions. They were often stored away, given as gifts, or used in casinos and vending machines. And yet, their presence carried a certain prestige. Larger than quarters, heavier than dimes, the half-dollar represented something distinct in the American coinage system. The 1977 half-dollar was minted at two main facilities, Philadelphia and Denver, each producing millions of coins. The Philadelphia coins bore no mint mark, while the Denver coins carried the familiar D mark on the obverse beneath the truncation of Kennedy's portrait. San Francisco also struck proof coins for collectors with an S mint mark. These proofs were specially made with polished dies and planchets, yielding sharp details and mirror-like surfaces, intended not for circulation, but for numismatic appreciation. The obverse of the 1977 half-dollar continued to feature Gilroy Roberts' iconic portrait of John F. Kennedy, first introduced in 1964. The profile of the young president facing left became one of the most recognized designs in American coinage, with Roberts' careful rendering of Kennedy's hair conveying strength, vigor, and dignity. The inscriptions "Liberty" and "In God We Trust" framed the portrait along with the date 1977 below. A reverse Frank Gasparo's heraldic eagle remained unchanged, the eagle with a shield on its chest clutching an olive branch and arrows in its talons, surrounded by a ring of stars, and the inscription "United States of America" and half-dollar. This design drew inspiration from the Great Seal of the United States, symbolizing power, peace, and the federal government. Together, the obverse and reverse designs connected the coin to themes of leadership, patriotism, and national identity. The production figures for the 1977 half-dollar were substantial. Philadelphia struck over 43 million coins, while Denver produced more than 31 million. The San Francisco Mint added over 3 million proofs. Despite these large mintages, the half-dollar was not widely encountered in daily commerce. Banks often held rolls of them, but ordinary Americans seldom received them as change, and this made them both common in availability and yet strangely absent in circulation as numismatic pieces. The 1977 half-dollar is not considered rare in ordinary condition. Circulated coins are easily found, and their value is typically just their face value. However, in uncirculated condition, especially coins graded highly by professional services, they can command premiums. Collectors seek examples with sharp strikes, minimal contact marks, and strong luster. The San Francisco proofs, meanwhile, attract interest from enthusiasts building proof sets and specialized Kennedy half-dollar collections. Some varieties also add intrigue to the 1977 half-dollar series. Errors, such as doubled dies, repunched mint marks, and striking anomalies, are carefully studied by specialists. While these varieties are relatively scarce, they bring excitement to the field because they connect ordinary-looking coins to rare production quirks of the mint. The 1977 half-dollar is also significant because it reflects the ongoing role of the Kennedy half-dollar as a commemorative symbol long after its initial release. By the mid-70s, the emotional immediacy of Kennedy's assassination had softened, but the coin remained a constant reminder of his legacy. It carried forward into the Carter years, into the Reagan years, and beyond, serving as a circulating memorial to a president who inspired a generation. In cultural terms, the coin tied Americans to the ideals of the new frontier and the promise of leadership that Kennedy embodied. Even as the nation faced new challenges in global politics and domestic economics, the Kennedy half-dollar offered continuity, stability, and remembrance. The year 1977 also sits in an important chapter of minting history for the United States Mint itself. During this era, new technologies were being refined. The mints were experimenting with improved coining presses, die preparation, and quality control. that laid groundwork for modern numismatics. The coins of the late 70s are part of this transitional period where mass production met growing collector interest, and the Kennedy half-dollar was at the forefront of this experience for millions of hobbyists. To craft a detailed history of the 1977 half-dollar is to recognize it as more than just copper and nickel. It is a snapshot of American identity, economics, and memory. It ties into the legacy of President Kennedy, reveals the technical achievements and challenges of the mint. It reflects patterns of usage in American commerce, and it remains a cornerstone of modern coin collecting. From the minute details of die varieties to the sweeping story of its design heritage, the 1977 half-dollar offers endless depth for numismatists, historians, and everyday Americans who hold one and wonder about its story. Every scratch, every shine, every mint mark tells a piece of that history, and when you see the face of Kennedy on the obverse, you are not just seeing a president, you are seeing the hopes and struggles of a nation etched in metal. The 1977 half-dollar endures as a bridge between past and present, a coin born of tragedy, sustained by patriotism, and preserved by collectors who know that even the most common-looking pieces can carry extraordinary stories when viewed through the lens of history. This is why a simple coin can fill hours of exploration, and why the 1977 half-dollar deserves its place, not only in albums and collections, but in the broader narrative of America itself. Imagine holding in your hand a piece of American history struck in 1995. A half-dollar coin that on the surface seems like just another circulating piece of money, but in reality carries layers of symbolism, artistry, politics, economics, and a story that ties into both national identity and modern coinage design. The 1995 half-dollar coin stands as a continuation of a long lineage of Kennedy half-dollars, a series that began in 1964 as a tribute to President John F. Kennedy following his tragic assassination. This coin is not just about its silver-colored appearance or its face value. It represents the continuation of a cultural legacy, the struggle of the United States Mint to maintain relevance in a changing monetary system, and the story of how Americans interacted with their currency in the last decade of the 20th century. To understand the 1995 half-dollar, you must first trace the Kennedy half-dollar series back to its birth in 1964, when the nation mourned the loss of its young president. The coin quickly became a symbol of national unity, but as years passed, it also became a reminder of the challenges facing circulating coinage: the rising cost of silver, inflation, and the decline in use of half-dollars for everyday transactions. By the mid-1990s, the coin had become more of a collector's item than a coin of commerce. In 1995, this dynamic was firmly in place, and the Kennedy half-dollar struck that year carries with it the story of why Americans still clung to the design, what role the coin served in the minting system, and how collectors saw in it a connection to both modern history and numismatic heritage. The obverse of the 1995 half-dollar continued the tradition of Gilroy Roberts' portrait of John F. Kennedy, an image that had become one of the most recognized in American numismatics. This design was carefully sculpted to capture Kennedy's youthful vigor, his iconic hairstyle, and his statesman-like presence. In the 1995 issue, this design remained unaltered, but what made it interesting was how the mint preserved this likeness while also keeping up with the standards of modern engraving technology. Collectors of the time could see in the details of Kennedy's face the balance between mid-20th century artistry and the precision of late 20th century minting technology. The inscriptions "Liberty and God We Trust" and the date 1995 carried not only the formal identity of the coin, but also the reminder of continuity across decades. The reverse of the coin featured the presidential seal, adapted by Frank Gasparro, showing the heraldic eagle with a shield on its breast holding an olive branch and arrows in its talons, and surrounded by 50 stars. This was not merely decorative, it was a direct representation of the power, authority, and symbolism of the American presidency, a reminder of Kennedy's role and the enduring institution of the office. In 1995, this reverse still resonated strongly with the public. tying the coin to themes of patriotism, governance, and national pride. Composition of the 1995 half-dollar reflected changes that had occurred decades earlier. While the first Kennedy half-dollars were struck in 90% silver, the mint transition to a copper-nickel-clad composition in 1971, making the coin more practical for mass production and circulation. The 1995 issue followed this same copper-nickel-clad standard with the core of pure copper and outer layers of copper-nickel alloy. The mint also produced a limited number of silver proofs for collectors in 90% silver. These silver proofs struck at San Francisco held special significance for collectors who valued both the intrinsic metal content and the brilliance of proof. Striking methods. The production of half-dollars in 1995 was largely influenced by collector demand rather than general circulation. By this time, most Americans rarely encountered half-dollars in daily commerce. Banks stocked them infrequently, and vending machines seldom accepted them. Yet the United States Mint continued to strike millions of them, largely because collectors and hobbyists purchased rolls and mint sets, keeping the series alive. This is crucial to understanding the 1995 half-dollar. It was a coin minted in large numbers, but seldom used in transactions, a coin that was more a symbolic continuation of tradition than a practical tool of commerce. The Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint were the primary facilities for circulation strikes, while the San Francisco Mint specialized in proof versions for collectors. Each mint mark carried its own value for numismatists. Philadelphia coins bore no mint mark. Denver coins carried the D, and San Francisco coins carried the S. The proof coins were especially prized for their mirror-like fields, frosted devices, and overall sharp detail. The quality of the 1995 proof half-dollars demonstrated the mint's ongoing commitment to producing collector-grade coins that could hold their own against the finest world issues. One of the most fascinating aspects of the 1995 half-dollar lies in its role within numismatic culture of the 1990s. This was a decade of revival in American coin collecting, with interest fueled by both the advent of modern proof sets and the anticipation of the State Quarters program, which would debut in 1999. The Kennedy half-dollar remained a central anchor for collectors, and the 1995 issue symbolized a bridge between the classic era of mid-century commemorative coinage and the modern era of popular coin collecting. While casual Americans may not have used the coin much, serious hobbyists continued to study varieties, mintages, and quality levels, making the 1995 half-dollar a subject of detailed cataloging. Mintage figures themselves tell part of the story, with tens of millions struck for circulation, but far fewer actually circulating. The majority found their way into collections, coin rolls, or government packaged sets. The scarcity in circulation made the coin feel almost like a semi-numismatic piece in its own time. The 1995 half-dollar was not rare in absolute terms, but it was rare in daily life, which made the experience of encountering one in pocket change all the more remarkable. From a historical perspective, the 1995 half-dollar illustrates the broader economic and cultural trends of the United States during the 1990s. This was an era of relative economic stability, technological progress, and global influence. The coin reflects the persistence of traditional national symbols, even as the country moved toward a new millennium. Also reflects the mint's balancing act between practicality and tradition. The half-dollar was not essential for commerce, but it was essential for heritage and public symbolism. Collectors today look back at the 1995 half-dollar as an important marker in the Kennedy series. While not as rare or valuable as key dates, it remains significant for its role in maintaining continuity. It represents the late modern period of the series, before the design began to be overshadowed by newer and flashier programs like the 50 state quarters and the presidential dollar coins. Yet, the 1995 half-dollar held its place, reminding collectors that the Kennedy series was not just about rarity or value, but about memory, continuity, and national identity. So, when you hold a 1995 half-dollar, you are not simply holding 50 cents, you are holding a coin that represents a 30-year-old tribute to an American president, a coin that carries artistry from Gilroy Roberts and Frank Gasparo, a coin that symbolizes a period of American culture where coins transition from practical tools of commerce to cherished collectible artifacts. Its story is long detailed and deeply connected to the narrative of American coinage, and it remains a fascinating study for numismatists, historians, and casual coin lovers alike.
What if I told you that an old coin sitting unnoticed in your drawer could be worth more than what it says on its face? What if I told you that the 1984 2 Piso from the Philippines and vintage US quarters aren't just pieces of metal but are time machines holding the secrets of a nation's economy, revolution, art, and hidden rarity? What if I told you that one of these coins sold for more than a week's wage and the other tells a story of political transformation, minting errors, and deep collector demand? Today, we're diving into the full, professional, detailed, untold, and uninterrupted story of the 1984 2 Piso coin and the historic valuation of old US quarters, revealing truths that even seasoned numismatists overlook. So get ready, because this isn't just coin collecting, this is coin decoding. In the year 1984, the Philippines was under the rule of Ferdinand Marcos, a presidency marked by martial law, political unrest, and economic instability. Yet, amid this turbulence, the Banco Central ng Pilipinas released a coin that would silently etch itself into the monetary and historical memory of the nation. The 2 Piso coin, made from copper-nickel-clad steel, weighed exactly 8.5 grams with a diameter of 29 millimeters and bore the image of Andres Bonifacio, the father of the Philippine Revolution, whose face was determined and resolute, etched on the obverse with the name Republica ng Pilipinas, curving proudly above. Was more than just a face on currency. He was the embodiment of rebellion, courage, and national spirit. A fitting symbol for a coin minted during one of the most turbulent decades in modern Philippine history. The Marcos regime was unraveling beneath corruption allegations and civil unrest, and while the masses faced inflation and political crackdowns, the coinage system quietly evolved, reflecting the tension of the time. The reverse of the coin was stamped with the central bank seal and the date 1984 beneath it. But unlike other coins in circulation, this particular minting year would later become iconic, not just for what it represented politically, but for its increasing scarcity in pristine condition and unique production characteristics. Collectors began to notice that uncirculated or proof versions of the 19842 Piso were harder to find, especially those without edge damage or oxidation, and this scarcity made the 1984 edition increasingly valuable in numismatic circles, with auction prices ranging from $10 to over $50 USD, depending on grade, luster, and provenance. But the story doesn't end there. To truly understand the value and significance of the 1984 Piso coin, we must look at the parallel world of American coinage, specifically the old quarters of the United States, which had followed their own evolutionary journey from 1796 to the modern day. And in the early 1980s, U.S. quarters were also undergoing changes, though less political and more practical. The 1984 U.S. quarter, for example, featured the familiar image of George Washington on the obverse and the American eagle on the reverse, designed by John Flanagan. The coin was part of the Washington Quarter series, first introduced in 1932 and produced in large numbers at the Philadelphia and Denver Mints. The 1984 US quarter, while common in circulated form, becomes increasingly valuable when it displays rare minting errors such as off-center strikes, doubled dies, clipped planchettes, or missing clad layers. And in recent years, several 1984 quarters with high mint state grades or dramatic errors have sold for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. One such MS67 example sold for over $1,000 at auction due to its flawless surfaces and sharp detail, reflecting how condition and rarity define collector value. So what do the 19842 Piso and 1984 US quarter have in common beyond their year? They are both products of countries navigating political and economic pressures. They both represent numismatic moments. Frozen in metal, they both reveal the artistry and technology of minting practices in the 1980s, and they both have surged in collector value due to rarity, historical context, and preservation. But the rabbit hole goes deeper. Consider the evolution of Philippine coinage leading up to 1984. Prior to the 2 Piso coin, the denomination had appeared in earlier forms, including paper notes, but as inflation worsened and the economy demanded more durable currency, the shift toward metal coins became necessary. The design of the Bonifacio coin wasn't just aesthetic, it was a statement, a call to national pride. During a decade of growing dissent, this coin circulated heavily among working-class Filipinos who used it to buy bread, gasoline, bus fares, and basic essentials, and unknowingly passed along pieces of history with every transaction. Meanwhile, in America, the 1984 quarter was entering cash registers and vending machines across a booming Reagan-era economy, yet hidden among the billions minted were a few with imperfections, and it is these imperfections that collectors treasure today. These flaws tell a story of production pressure, high-speed minting, and the human and mechanical errors that created rare anomalies, each coin a silent witness to a moment in time. Now let's go back to the 2 Piso and examine Its physical characteristics in detail, the metal composition made it susceptible to surface rust and environmental damage. Particularly in tropical climates, this makes mint examples even more difficult to find, and coin grading agencies like PCGS and NGC rarely encounter perfect specimens from this year. This scarcity has contributed to rising auction prices, especially among overseas collectors seeking to complete Southeast Asian coin collections. Another point worth mentioning is the historic role of Andres Bonifacio on Philippine coins. He was featured again in later series, but the 1984 coin was among the last before a full currency redesign in the late 1980s and early 1990s that moved toward smaller, lighter coins. The larger Piso coins were eventually demonetized, phased out of daily use, and became collectibles instead of currency. In contrast, the US quarter remains one of the most stable coin denominations in the world, still retaining the same size and metal blend used since 1965, yet the interest in older quarters has exploded, particularly as silver versions from pre-1965 command high prices due to intrinsic metal value. But silver isn't the only factor. A rarity, demand, mint era, and historic context all contribute to value, and both the 1984 US quarter and 2 Piso coin carry that complex mix today. You might find a 1984 2 Piso selling on eBay for $5 to $30 in circulated condition, but certified coins go much higher, especially if they're part of a complete set or exhibit full original mint brilliance. Similarly, an old quarter from 1984 might seem ordinary, but a rare era could fetch you a small fortune in the right collector market. As we move deeper into the global coin market, we see how collectors are not just buying metal, they are investing in stories, legacies, fragments of history captured in a circular form, and that is what makes both the 1984 2 Piso and 1984 quarter iconic. The coins themselves might be small, but the stories behind them are massive, transcending borders, economies, and generations. So whether you are holding onto a weathered 2 Piso from the streets of Manila or an old quarter from a dusty American, draw pause for a moment and realize that you're holding history, and that history could be far more valuable than you think. Have you ever wondered how a small copper nickel coin that once passed through the hands of millions of Filipinos in 1990 could evolve into one of the most hunted coins by collectors worldwide today? The 2 Piso coin of 1990 is not just a relic of economic history, it is a story etched in metal of a nation undergoing transformation, of leadership, of monetary reform, and of culture and patriotism. This is not just about its face value. This is about the value it holds for historians, collectors, and currency experts, and this video is your ultimate deep dive into everything you need to know about the 1992 Piso coin in a way you've never seen before. We begin in the late 1980s. The Philippines had emerged from the shadow of the Marcos dictatorship and was entering a new chapter of its national identity under President Corazon Aquino. The economy was rebuilding, inflation was stabilizing, and the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas was working on modernizing the country's currency system. It was in this context that the 2 Piso coin of 1990 was minted. This coin was not just another denomination, it was a bold statement reflecting economic pragmatism and national pride. The coin was part of the Flora and Fauna series and features the image of Apolinario Mabini, one of the brightest legal minds and one of the intellectual architects of the Philippine Revolution against Spanish rule. His portrait was chosen to remind every Filipino who held a coin of the sacrifices made for freedom and the enduring value of wisdom and leadership. The 2 Piso 1990 coin was made of copper nickel and had a weight of 8.5 grams with a diameter of 27 millimeters. It was struck with precision and clarity, bearing on the obverse side the image of Mabini along with the inscription Republica ng Pilipinas and the year 1990. On the reverse side was the denomination 2 Piso and the logo of the Central Bank of the Philippines. It was a coin designed not just for transactions but for national representation, and its circulation spread across all islands of the Philippines, from the bustling streets of Manila to the remote provinces. It was a coin that held purchasing power that could buy a loaf of bread, a bus ride, or a newspaper. But the real value of the 2 Piso 1990 coin would only begin to reveal itself decades later as it started to disappear from regular circulation. Many were melted down, lost, or damaged, while others were quietly collected by early numismatists who recognized that the coin had some unique characteristics that set it apart from other mint years. Some of these coins had minting errors, including off-center strikes, misaligned dies, and double strikes, and these error coins started appearing in coin markets, being sold for well above face value, not just in the Philippines but in international numismatic circles. Collectors in the United States, Europe, and Asia began trading and bidding on high-grade specimens of the 2 Piso 1990, especially those graded by reputable agencies like NGC and PCGs, where MS63 and higher examples fetched prices ranging from $50 to several $100 depending on the strike quality, luster, and rarity. These coins became desirable because they marked a period of transition and stability in the Philippines, something many collectors value as it adds historical weight to the coin itself. We also have to examine the coin's context in relation to the evolution of the Philippine peso and why this denomination would be eventually phased out. The 2 Piso coin was produced from 1983 to 1994. But the 1990 version became particularly collectible because of its lower mintage compared to other years and because it was among the most widely circulated coins before inflationary adjustments in the early 1990s began to affect small denominations, eventually leading to redesigns and the creation of the BSP coin series that replaced it. But let us go even deeper. What was the purchasing power of this coin in 1990? What did it mean to the ordinary Filipino citizen? And how did economic policies of the time affect the value of money in their pockets? The coin could buy a full jeepney ride, a bag of rice, or a bowl of noodles for a working-class family. It had real value and utility, and as the peso underwent fluctuations and the government restructured its financial institutions, this coin began to reflect the resilience and adaptability of the Filipino people. We trace the journey of this coin from mint to marketplace, from circulation to retirement, and finally to auction houses and collectors' vaults. We'll look at stories from those who hoarded them unknowingly, those who inherited them from their parents or grandparents, and numismatists who today travel across countries to find a flawless copy of this iconic 2-peso coin of 1990. We'll also walk through the entire coin grading process, how to spot counterfeits, how to identify mint errors, and how to protect your coin's value over time, whether you have a circulated copy or a pristine uncirculated one. This video will give you the tools to understand its full potential, and of course we will explore where this coin stands in today's market. What are the latest auction records? What are collectors looking for? And what future trends are emerging? Is the value still rising? What makes the 1990 version so appealing compared to 1983 or 1994? And how can you determine if your coin is worth hundreds of dollars or just a piece of historical pocket change? By the end of this video, you will not just be an observer, you will be an expert in the 1992 Piso coin, its legacy, its market, and its future. We will look at comparisons between international coins of similar composition and era, such as the US quarter, the Canadian $2 coin, and various Asian denominations, to show how regional economic changes influenced coin design, mint output, and cultural symbolism. So, stay with us as we unfold the full history, the technical details, the historical moments, the collector value, and the future of one of the most underrated yet powerful coins from Southeast Asia, the 19902 Piso coin from the Philippines, a coin that tells more than a story. It tells the journey of a nation and the enduring power of metal in a world of paper and plastics. Prescribe now to old quarters dollar value and let this coin unlock the treasure chest of history waiting in your pocket. Changed. Understand the value of the 1990 Piso coin. We have to go back to the Philippines in the late 1980s, a country in transition following the fall of Ferdinand Marcos. The nation was on the road to democratic reform under the presidency of Corazon Aquino. It was a time of great change politically and economically. Inflation was being tamed, but it was still unstable, and the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the central bank, was working on stabilizing the currency system. As part of that effort, the Flora and Fauna series of coins was introduced to promote national pride and to reflect the cultural and natural heritage of the Philippines on everyday currency. The 2-peso coin was introduced in this series not only as a denomination but as a symbol of leadership. The coin bears the image of Apolinario Mabini, known as the Sublime Paralytic, a brilliant thinker and hero of the Philippine Revolution who, despite his physical limitations, used his intellect and pen to help guide the nation's founding philosophy. This was more than a monetary decision. It was cultural, it was educational. Every person who held that coin was holding a reminder of Filipino resistance against oppression and the value of mental strength over physical limitations. The 1992 Piso coin was composed of copper nickel and had a mass of 8.5 grams with a diameter of 27 millimeters. It was thick, solid, and easy to identify. It featured Apolinario Mabini on the obverse with the inscription Republica ng Pilipinas and the year 1990 placed along the rim. The reverse displayed the bold denomination 2-peso with the logo of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, a stylized representation of the Philippines sun and 3 stars. The edges were reeded, providing better security against counterfeiting while also giving it a more refined feel in the hand. In terms of strike quality, the 1990 issue was considered fairly well struck, with many examples showing sharp detail on Mabini's facial features and clear inscriptions. However, several mint errors and variations exist, which we will discuss in detail later in the video. Have you ever held a coin in your hand and wondered if the world remembers where it came from, what it went through, and how many lives it passed through before it landed in your palm? Have you ever considered that a simple piece of metal could hold the secrets of nations, revolutions, cultures, political transformations, and forgotten empires today? We will dive into the rich, turbulent, and fascinating story of a coin that many overlook, the 1983 2-peso coin from the Philippines. It may look ordinary at first glance, but behind its copper-nickel glow lies a story of a country in the midst of transformation. A government holding on to control an economy, teetering between inflation and hope, and a people whose spirit was imprinted into every coin that changed hands, from the bustling streets of Manila to rural markets in Mindanao. This coin was there, and what's more, its connection to old American quarters gives it a legacy far beyond its borders. We are about to unravel the complete journey, the mintage, the hidden errors, The political significance, the design origins, and the current collector's value of the 2 Piso 1983 coin, while also linking its monetary DNA to the legendary United States quarters and the broader currency transitions of the 20th century. Buckle up as we take you through an in-depth historical investigation, numismatic breakdown, and collector analysis that spans more than 2 centuries of coin evolution from colonial currency systems to the modern collector markets of eBay and auction houses. This is not just about money, this is about time, identity, value, and the echoes of history carved in metal. Begin full documentary-length script for 2-hour video. The year is 1983 and the Philippines is a nation at a crossroads. Ferdinand Marcos remains in power, but tensions have begun to swell beneath the surface of government propaganda as economic instability surges. Inflation eats into the average citizen's wages and political unrest grows louder in hushed conversations at kitchen tables and on busy sidewalks. It was in this exact year that a curious piece of currency emerged, a coin that would serve millions in daily transactions, but also one that would silently record the historical pulse of an era. The 2 Piso coin bearing the portrait of revolutionary hero Andres Bonifacio was minted by the Banco Central ng Pilipinas as part of the new design series, replacing the old series that had begun to lose public trust. But what makes this coin so special? It is more than its face value, more than its composition, more than the image of a national icon. It is the context behind its birth, the reason for its issuance, the subtle changes in mint marks, font shifts, alloy adjustments, and die errors that create rare collector variants, and the way its economic trajectory mirrors that of the Philippines in the early 1980s. To understand the 2 Piso coin, we must first understand the Philippine economy during the martial law years and how Marcos' currency reforms were not merely economic decisions, but political moves to tighten control and reinforce a narrative of national unity. Despite rising unrest, the coin features Andres Bonifacio, leader of the Katipunan, a secret society that led the revolution against Spanish colonial rule. Unlike coins that featured presidents or political figures, Bonifacio's presence was symbolic. It was meant to invoke strength, rebellion, pride, and above all, independence. But the irony was not lost on historians that his face appeared during a time when freedom was heavily restricted. The reverse of the coin displayed the seal of the Republic of the Philippines, a visual of nationalism attempting to reinforce the state's authority. But within this design lies a subtle artistic evolution that tracks the visual culture of the period. From 1983 to 1990, minor details in the way the leaves of the laurel wreath are curved, or the angle of the sun rays began to change, due to die updates or even political influences affecting state symbolism. Now, let us link this to the American quarter dollar and understand how coinage philosophies influenced Philippine currency. The Philippines once used U.S. colonial currency following the Spanish-American War and during the Commonwealth era. Philippine coins were minted in the United States at mints like San Francisco and Philadelphia. Many featured dual inscriptions and bilingual symbolism echoing their hybrid governance. But even after independence, the structural, economic model and design templates of American coinage left a legacy. When the 2 Piso coin was designed, it borrowed aspects from the U.S. coin philosophy, including coin size, weight, edge milling, and symbolic front and back structure, a tribute to its monetary heritage and the influence of American numismatics on Southeast Asia. Furthermore, the 1983 2 Piso coin was among the last large denomination coins before hyperinflation devalued the peso in the late 80s into the 90s. Its brief window of dominance gives it rarity, but not necessarily in mintage numbers but in clean specimens. High-grade uncirculated coins from 1983 are difficult to find due to weak metallic alloys and poor handling practices by banks. This leads us to collector value today. While average circulated versions are found cheaply, there are error coins, mistrikes, off-center prints, and double-die versions that sell for hundreds, even thousands, depending on condition and documentation. From a material science standpoint, the coin's copper-nickel composition was chosen due to the rising cost of brass and bronze alloys, yet this composition made the coins more susceptible to corrosion in humid tropical climates, which again affects current numismatic value. Professional grading services like PCGs and NGC have only slabbed a handful of pristine examples, and in auction houses like Heritage or Stack's Bowers, authenticated error coins with die cracks or planchette flaws are increasingly sought after by Southeast Asian coin collectors and international dealers alike. Now let's go deeper into minting technology used in 1983. The Philippines employed a combination of locally maintained minting presses and foreign manufactured dies, including those made in West Germany and Japan. Due to prior international agreements, some 1983 2 Piso coins show micro-engraving anomalies that suggest a batch of dies used from leftover 1981 stocks, creating hybrid coins with visual inconsistencies in Bonifacio's hair texture or shoulder detail. These make for particularly rare and documented specimens which attract an international coin catalogs such as Krause's Standard Catalog of World Coins. We'll now compare this with the 1983 U.S. quarter. The Washington quarter that year was a copper-nickel-clad coin still struck with Cold War precision, bearing the stoic image of George Washington on the obverse and the iconic eagle on the reverse. Now consider this, both coins were minted in 1983, both were used in democracies. Grappling with economic shifts, both featured revolutionary symbols of liberty, and both are now studied as part of 20th century monetary anthropology. The key difference lies in perceived value due to preservation, circulation, and collector networks. While U.S. quarters from 1983 are common in circulated condition, uncirculated mint state examples, especially from mint sets, are valuable because no official mint sets were released that year by the U.S. Mint. This raises an intriguing parallel to the Philippine 2 Piso 1983, which also lacks high-end pristine supplies. We move through this numismatic journey. We also reflect on how coins shape national identity, how their imagery becomes propaganda or protests, and how they serve not only commerce but also memory. The 2 Piso coin of 1983 is now mostly out of circulation, phased out in favor of modern bimetallic or polymer notes, but its presence remains on auction blocks, collector guides, and in the drawers of those who remember what life cost back then and what hope was hidden in every metallic glint. To close this story, we are reminded that coins are not just forged, they are born into moments, into chaos, into control, and into belief. And the 2 Piso 1983 coin is a silent witness to a nation trying to hold itself together, to a history wrestling between pride and propaganda, and to a legacy still spinning in the hands of those who collect not just for profit but for truth.